Should adolescents learn about race realities? This is the question a lot of people ask themselves as parents. We're going to break down, should our young people know about the race realities? I personally believe that this question is going to be answered differently dependent on your relationship to the issues in American society, the racial issues that we're currently experiencing. I'm gonna black out 1 second. Let me get this data. All right, I'm back. Based on your relationship to systemic racism, you're going to have a very different answer as to whether or not your child should, or your adolescent, preteen, should know about the racial realities today. This is just my thoughts and my opinions. When you don't, as an African American in America, teach your adolescents, young people about racial realities, you communicate to them that they are solely responsible for the disadvantages they may experience in life. And it's not just tied to economics, even socially, because your net worth is your net worth is your net worth. Okay. Now, there's a difference between being responsible and solely responsible for something. Is each American responsible for the different data and statistics around economics, money coming in, money coming out, GDP, things of that nature? Absolutely. There, we have some responsibility based off of what we're putting in. Are Americans solely responsible for the function of the economy? Absolutely not. You have the role of the government, you have the role of the politicians, policies that are being passed, lawmakers, things of that nature. So there's a difference between being responsible and solely responsible. And I believe that when African American parents opt out of teaching their children about race realities, you communicate to that younger person that they are solely responsible for disadvantages they may experience socially and economically. How you educate and you teach your younger people about racial realities is everything. Do you go out and tell your kids, hey, by the way, you're going to have some disadvantages? People are not going to like you, so don't even try. Absolutely not. And we live in a very black and white society, so it's hard for people to see two truths can coexist. There's a reality that, yes, you educate them on history, how these histories and these policies and these sort of economic realities have come into play. And you also educate them on, you know, what the school system can't teach them: morale, ethics, empowerment, self confidence, self worth, self love. Public school is going to teach you math, science, social studies. You need to teach your children how to have confidence and how to be empowered and how to be skillful despite these realities. It's like when you're lost in an environment or you're visiting somewhere out of state, you ask somebody for directions. If they give you the wrong directions, more than likely you're going to be pissed off. All right. You're going to be driving in circles. Who likes being lost? Driving in circles, you get frustrated. They told me to turn left. I turned left and was supposed to be right. Now I done cut time out of my destination because of me giving the wrong directions. That's kind of the disadvantage you set your child up as an African American when you don't educate them on racial realities. You're like giving them the wrong driving directions, and you're also assuming that they're solely responsible. Now, white people have a different relationship to systemic inequality and racism because they represent a larger portion of the workforce. So, what benefit is it to them to tell their children, hey, by the way, there's these racial realities out here, which I think it is some benefit to for some white people because some white people get discriminated against too. Okay, so it is benefit for them to sort of socially be aware of this and even economically. However, I can see where the argument from their particular tribe, this isn't really necessary. Why? Because the systemic realities of racism are not drastically impacting their share of the labor force. Okay. So here, it says here in politics and government, for example, US Congress, the white population represents 75% of persons in these roles. Governors, there are about 80% plus white governors in the US. Senior federal executive positions, white people hold 75% of a share in these roles. Federal workforce overall, whites hold 61%, blacks are at 18%, Hispanics are at 10%, Asians are at 7%. Corporate leadership, Fortune 500 CEOs, whites hold about 80% of these roles, blacks 8%, Hispanic 5%, Asian 7%, corporate boards, whites hold about 75%, blacks 10%, Hispanics 6%, Asians 7%. Okay, the median household wealth for white families is around 285,000. For black families, it's 45,000. Hispanic families is 61,000. Home ownership rates, whites hold the lead at 74%, blacks at 45%, Hispanics at 51%, Asians at 63%. Okay. So, for the most part, they are not going to be the population that is pro educate their children or race realities because, for the most part, these realities have not hindered their portion or their short share of these positions. So, what do we mean when we say race realities? What are race realities? Well, race realities first start off in your psychology. It's a psychological thing, okay? Everything starts off with the mind, with your thoughts, with your attitude, with your belief system, all right? Assumptions. These hold tremendous power in the human economy. And when people are interacting with other people, they tend to emulate their environments, especially younger people. They're very vulnerable. And it's important for younger minorities, younger African American minorities to understand that just because people around you socially and the racism is starting to get younger and younger, you're seeing a lot of, even on social media, you're seeing younger people who probably haven't really even left their front porch have some of the most prejudiced, discriminatory attitudes towards African Americans, and they almost sound like white folks in their 60s and 70s. And these people are all of 25. They're babies. So you're already seeing this cycle of this toxicity and this hatred towards each other based off of race start sort of like recycling itself in the younger generation. And it's important for younger African Americans to understand that these these truths that these different groups hold, and it can really apply to everybody, but for the sake of the conversation, for African Americans, because we're getting hit the hardest with this, even with this whole Voting Rights Act being attacked, they don't even want black folks to have a voice in the voting booth. All right. So it's like slowly but surely they're trying to erase the influence of black folks in politics. Okay. So I'm focusing on black people in this conversation. This conversation ain't for everybody, which more than likely you guys can extract wisdom from it because, human beings always feel like everything applies to them. So for black folks, you have to understand as a younger person that every thought that you have isn't a thought worth having, and that includes people around you, their thoughts about you, their beliefs about you. Oh, black people like this, or my mommy told me black people like this, because young people are very impressionable. So when they see other cultures and other races holding these extremely prejudiced ideologies, and if they haven't been educated on these realities, they'll emulate and they will absorb these truths and they will treat them as if they're just these undeniable realities. And that can significantly impact the momentum of that younger black person in economy, in academics, even in their family life, because they don't have sort of like any sort of knowledge of the reality that they're dealing with. So it definitely has to be a lesson that's taught with skill and also a dialectic of being able to empower them and to teach them where their power is. Because for the most part, why a lot of these conversations get diminished because they essentially exist outside of the realm of our power, right? Even if you educate your children on these realities, it's not like there's a whole lot they can do about what white folks think about them, what Hispanics think about them, what Asians think about them, right? So I could understand the argument of like, okay, why do I want to make them more powerless? It's not. Multiple truths can coexist. You don't leave the conversation with, hey, by the way, these are the realities. You're fucked. You still empower, you still educate, you still teach them skills, you still help build them up where they're able to skillfully provide for themselves. All right. That's what parenting is about. This is a lifelong thing. We got to get out of this idea that, hey, you teach them up until they're 18 or 14, 15, and you just let them go. No, you got to constantly be a presence in your child's ear, in your child's life. You got to constantly, when they're coming back to you with questions and information, you got to constantly keep empowering them. Because when you're ignorant, that's how the system benefits. That's why a lot of Black history and racial realities between Black and white folks is being erased because they want you ignorant. They don't want you understanding why the system is set up the way it is. And when you're ignorant, you'll have your Black children going out there and just like, these white folks are better. They have all the positions of leadership. They have all the CEO positions. They have all the home ownership. They have all the land. They have all this influence. White folks are better. That's what the consequence of systemic racism and what this has created historically for Black people is that 400 years forward, with all the murder, with all the opportunities that were taken away from Black people, with all the Black businesses that were burned down, with all the massacres when African Americans did try to come together, with everything that was strategically implemented to keep Black people back. All it communicated 500, 400 years later to a lot of the world was, hey, us white folks are better. Look at all this shit we got. You guys are down there. If you want to come in, you got to go through me. And when you don't educate your younger Black people, you communicate to them, you're not good enough. That's why you're not in these roles. They're better than you, right? You send a really just unhealthy message to the younger people. So, should children learn about racial realities? Should they be aware? Adolescents, as they get older, absolutely, but it also should be in the spirit of you making sure that they have the skills and the tools and resources necessary to create their own. To create their own. The racial realities are a part of the system, but teach your children to create their own systems, to be creators. That's the way I think that it should be done.